With the conclusion of World War II in September of 1945, satellites began to revolutionize as both Russia and the United States were in a race to be first. In 1957, the Soviet Union sent the first satellite, Sputnik 1, into space. The satellite's communication interface consisted of a set of beeping radio transmitters which relayed messages to stations back on Earth. After learning of this launch, the United States began to panic because they were slipping behind the Soviet Union. The United States' first attempt at launch was on December 6, 1957, where they launched the United States Navy Vanguard rocket. Unfortunately, this rocket was not successful in its launch and crashed back on the ground, where it exploded into pieces. After another year of testing and research, the United States launched the first successful rocket, the Jupiter C, into space. Jupiter C was not only the first successful rocket, but it carried America's first communication satellite, Explorer 1, on board with it. With the launch of the first satellite, Explorer 1, the United States reached a new point of development in the space industry. Although Explorer 1 did not have any form of communication that relayed back to Earth, it still served the purpose of discovering the Earth's radiation belts. In the July of 1958, shortly after the launch of the first satellite, the United States Congress proceeded to pass the National Aeronautics and Space Act, which also formed the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. This act and administration created an awakening for new opportunities for space exploration and communication. For example, before the end of 1958, the United States launched their first attempted communication satellite, SCORE, Signal Communication by Orbiting Relay Equipment. This satellite, launched by the United States Air Force, unfortunately did not receive and transmit a signal from Earth, meaning that it's not considered a communication satellite. However, in August of 1960, the first passive communication satellite, Echo 1, was launched into space. This device was made up of aluminized mylar plastic, which resembled a balloon-like shape. Its purpose was to reflect radio signals past the curve of Earth. In Eisenhower's statement from the White House, he says that many small, unmanned Earth-circling satellites will be used to gather information. The United States will be participating in the International Geophysical Year by launching these satellites. All of the data gathered from the program would be shared with all the scientists throughout the world. During the press conference, Eisenhower's answers to the questions about what the United States is going to do about Russia launching an Earth satellite, and also claiming that he had launched and that they have launched international ballistic missiles.
For the government, the National Science Foundation was made the monitor of the work for the simple reason that from the beginning, the whole American purpose and design in this effort has been to produce the maximum in scientific information. The project was sold to me on this basis.
There were many satellites throughout the Cold War that were used for reconnaissance. Some keyhole satellites are the Corona satellite, KH-7 Gambit, KH-11 Crystal, and others. The Corona satellites were the first reconnaissance satellites to be used for gathering information. Images would be captured on photographic film canisters that would be dropped out of atmosphere to be collected by pilots and planes. The Gambit series were an upgrade from the previously used Corona satellites. The difference in success between the Gambit and Corona satellites was apparent. High-resolution images were made possible with the Gambit satellites and were impossible for the Corona satellites to take. The data gathered from the better quality images would help the United States keep track of the Soviet Union. The Crystal satellite replaced the film injection system of the Corona and Gambit and instead used radio-transmitted photographs. This would take multiple hours instead of multiple weeks from the Corona series. This allowed the U.S. to have a real-time observation of the Soviet Union. With the development of the keyhole satellites, reconnaissance information improved and allowed the United States to act based on what they saw.
Good evening, my fellow citizens.
The United States realized the Soviet Union was
has
assembling and
maintained
gathering missiles
closest
in Cuba
surveillance
by having a
of Soviet
Corona
military
satellite take
buildup
images of what was
on the
happening.
island of Cuba.
As a result, this led
Within the
to the
past
beginning of the
week,
Cuban Missile Crisis.
unmistakable
U-2 spy
evidence has
planes were also
established
used
the
to
fact
identify the
that a
missiles.
series of offensive
With the Corona
missile
satellites and the
strikes
U-2 spy planes,
is
the
now in
United States were
preparation.
able to stop the Soviets before the situation escalated. One of the first major successes of satellite broadcasting was President Eisenhower's first radio broadcast to the people.
We have on tape or recorded the voice of the President of the United States as it's being broadcast to Earth from our great satellite put into orbit last night. Through Radio Press, WBAI, and this particular program are able to bring you the voice of the President of the United States as it is being endlessly repeated in the endless orbit around the world, a voice addressed to all men everywhere.
This is the President of the United States speaking. Through the marvels of scientific advance, my voice is coming to you from a satellite circling in outer space. Through this unique means, I convey to you and to all mankind America's wish for peace on earth and goodwill toward men everywhere.
I believe it would be very difficult indeed for me to add to that. We have been happy indeed to be able to bring it to you.
In the President's broadcast on December 19th, he wishes for world peace and good men. The satellite was launched into orbit and played once Eisenhower's messages broadcast to Earth. This was one of the first ever public broadcasts over satellites. The way of satellite radio communication was paved by this broadcast. One major factor in technological innovation during the Cold War came with the end of the space race. The Apollo 11 mission was the first manned mission on the moon and saw the first men to walk on it. As President Kennedy promised years before at a speech at Rice University, a man had landed on the moon by the end of the century. One major success of the Apollo mission was the public broadcasting of the landing. In a footage, you could see Neil Armstrong making his famous saying, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The broadcast from the moon to worldwide TV is one of the most important communications efforts ever. Packed on the lunar rocket was one television camera equipped with a lens designed for the low contrasting colors of the moon. It had over 38 miles of gold wire to transmit the footage over 238,900 miles back to Earth. The signal was picked up from receivers around the world, like receivers in California and Australia. They were then sent to satellites orbiting the Earth and transmitted TV globally. The broadcast was seen worldwide and influenced media, pop culture, music, and style for the next years. Also, with Americans being the first to achieve a lunar landing, this ended the space race between Russia. With the end of the space race in 1975, the first joint space mission was conducted. This mission was called Apollo-Soyuz. It was one of the first times two countries worked together in space. This program represented the U.S. policy of détente, or the de-escalation of the Cold War. This was the first joint operation from the Soviet Union and the United States. While this program did not single-handedly end the Cold War, it did help de-escalate and start communications between the two powerhouse countries. This program is also seen as the beginning of the International Space Station. One of the largest factors in the peacetime cooperation is the ISS, where many countries like Canada, Japan, the Russian Federation, the United States, and the 11 countries of the European Space Agency take part.